So it was not in some ways completely for nothing, because in the totality of things in this world, some injustice that he suffered is helping someone else not suffer the same injustice.
I think that's the biggest thing in our job is like we need to learn to turn all of that internal grief into a fight, like fight for them. I don't think that you could be a good advocate if it didn't affect you.
Welcome to Counselor, Beyond Conventional Defense.
You know, considering the numbers we're dealing with, when we know that we have so many people who have mental health and substance abuse problems, one of the thoughts that I have, and one of the deficiencies that I feel we have systemically, is I don't think we're preparing people who want to follow in your footsteps or mine or those of our opponents. We need to educate people who are entering the profession. And if you went to law school and you decided you wanted to be, the prosecutor from Law and Order, SVU or whatever, and you think you're going to look that way and you're going to be saving your community from the scourge of criminality and drugs or whatever, that's not what you're going to experience in misdemeanor courts. Right. Nobody tells these people, Emily, we really appreciate that you wanted to apply for the job as a prosecutor. Just so you know, what you're going to be doing 50 to 75% of your time is prosecuting and incarcerating drug addicts and mentally ill people. How do you feel about that? Do you think anybody tells that to these folks in job interviews?
No, but I don't think that this is something that you can even really teach until you're in it. It's kind of like when you first start out, right? When you first have a misdemeanor case, the outrage that you feel on that misdemeanor case and what a case is worth, and then you go to felonies and you see felony cases. That you don't know it till you're in it. I think that you have to kind of see it for yourself. I can tell you that there's 50 to 75% of people who have substance abuse issues and mental health disorders. I don't think you actually know what it means until you see these police reports and can put a face to the name and put the conduct to the disorder.
That's because nobody is telling you about this in law school. Nobody is bringing guest speakers. Nobody is telling you these life stories. I recently was invited to give a guest lecture at the local law school. Mm-hmm. And I talked to young people about the things that I do in my firm, the approach that we use. I talked to them about competency and mental health, shockingly, the things that I care to talk about. And the reception I received was unbelievable. Students were meeting me afterwards saying, wow, you should come back and teach this. Right. Nobody talks to us about this. If you want to be a public defender, how many times have we heard from sort of the older generation that I didn't sign up for this to be a social worker? Well, you should have.
Right.
Because that's what you do. We're dealing with people who have no semblance of how to keep a job, folks who don't have housing, folks who have profound mental health issues due to a lifetime exposure to adverse childhood experiences, adverse adulthood experiences, trauma.
Right.
And so why aren't we teaching people in law school that if you want to be a public defender, make sure you sign up and you take psychology for lawyers, sociology 101, whatever. I mean, we should be having these conversations. If you're going to be in a rural jurisdiction, like Tulare, for example, or Monterey for that matter, or somewhere on the outskirts of Sacramento where you practice, shouldn't you know the difference between a person who shows up into your life in a state of meth-induced psychosis as opposed to a person who's fighting a raging fentanyl addiction? I mean, these folks are going to present completely differently. You're going to interact with them completely differently. Why is it that we wait until 5 years into the legal profession and we start attending conferences that we learn this? If people want to go into this profession, why aren't we getting in front of it? Why aren't we conditioning them that this is what you should be expecting? See, this is what I want to, talk to people about. This is what I want to advocate for. This is what I want to see changed.
I don't know. Maybe there's a fear or like a stigma. I don't know the reasoning behind it, but I definitely see that it's an issue, right? I think that even the way that you talk to your clients, but I think that is one of the best parts about having been a public defender before going into private practice. When you're in private practice, you may get that call before something has been filed or before they're in custody. When you're a public defender, you get it, and they are in jail, detoxing, not knowing what's going on, in the thick of it. And you come in a little bit at a different stage. And even though it's a slightly different stage, I think it makes a huge difference. And I think as a public defender, especially, you have the resources that they should be taking advantage of. You have different experts you can use or evaluations that can be completed. You have social workers in the office. You have people who can go and gather the information or pull the school records and all this stuff.
Today. I mean, we didn't have it when you and I were starting out per se.
Yeah, not at the beginning, but now they have them. I mean, I'm hoping that they will get to that point, where when you first get a case, you read through it. And one of the big things is their history. You go pull their school records. You find out why they did this, or when did they develop this issue, or why did they develop this drug addiction. And I think that will shape the entire trajectory of your case.
I agree with that. I think that's certainly something I would like to see more people do. But what amazes me, Emily, yet again, just last week, I am in court in this jurisdiction in Monterey County, and I'm watching somebody engaging in pretty substandard advocacy in court in an office where I know they have a social worker. I know they have a large budget. I know it because I worked in that office. The social worker they have is someone whose husband was a friend of mine when I worked there. You know what I mean? So I know the resources are there, and yet I'm in court and I watch subpar advocacy because people are not using even the resources they have because either they don't realize how to use it properly or they're lazy. And I think maybe sometimes it's
disturbing. I mean, you get into this line of work.
That's reality.
I know, but you do this line of work because you truly want to help people. You want to make a difference. You want to fight for them. I don't give a shit if you did the crime or you didn't do the crime. I'm going to fight for you no matter what. That is my job. And I think if people come into this profession without that attitude, they should leave.
Right. But reality check, they don't. They work in these jobs sometimes their entire lives. This is not just a public defender critique. This applies even worse, I think, in private practice, because I think a lot of our clients have this idea that any lawyer who is privately hired, no matter how little they charge, and especially when they charge a lot, is automatically going to be good.
Right.
Or, automatically is going to be a lot better than a public defender. That's simply not true.
Yeah.
Someone could have hired, a really crappy lawyer, or they could have had you, for example, who really would care and lose sleep and pour over the file. There's this tendency for people to believe that if they pay someone to represent them, they're automatically going to get superior quality lawyering. And that's not the case.
I lived that life.
I know.
My family hired that private attorney and put up their house to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars for the worst representation I have ever seen.
And you actually obtained the file. So you, with, 15 years of legal experience, now that you are who you are, obviously, extremely, extremely good at what you do and passionate about what you do. When you look back at that file, how did you feel when you looked at the mediocrity of it?
Outraged, crushed. I mean,
did you ever tell your mom what you saw?
No. I think my mom suffered a lot of guilt in thinking that she hired this big shot attorney and made the right call. And she knows that he was a bad lawyer. She knows that that's why I am a lawyer. But it's like salt in the wound, and it wasn't going to fix anything, And so after I pulled the file, I just kind of did what I could do to help my brother. I started trying to, 115 his write-ups and earn back credits that were lost and challenge different rule violations that, he went into prison when he actually hit the yard 21 years old and pissed off at the world.
Right.
And even though what people don't realize is, so even though his sentence was 20 years in prison and he had to serve 85%, it was a violent strike. So, he should have done 17 years, 8 months is about what he should have done. But because he got all of these write-ups when he first went in, and even a little bit after that, but, he kept losing his good time credit. And so even though they could never keep him past 20, when he finally started doing well, when he started getting college credits and I started pushing that he could get education credits and that those should count, he had to work. He had over 2 years negative before he could so even though he had a sentence of 20, he had lost 22 years worth of credits. So he had to earn back 2 years before he could start working backwards. And so
that's a crazy system.
Right. And so with his education and challenging some of these write-ups and earning back the credits and all of that, the best I could ever do was the original 2 years plus an extra 8 months. And so he got out at 19 years, 4 months. But, it was all of this stuff that I did the best I could with what I had with those choices. And me going back to my mom or my dad and saying, no respectable attorney would have ever done this, or this wasn't right, or,
I agree with you. I would have done the same exact thing. Because I think I think for families, it's important to know that they're doing what they can when they're confronted with this horrible family tragedy. And I agree with you. I would have handled it the same exact way.
And, my parents had been through enough. And prison was definitely not easy for him. And so it's like, I didn't want to add to that. And it wasn't going to change anything. I couldn't go back and change the deal or take anything away. Or I don't think there was anything where even if he was reported to the state bar, he would have necessarily been disbarred. It's like he didn't do a bad job. He did no job,
But I think what you took from that is you learned so much. Unfortunately, on the case involving someone you love, your own brother, but what you have learned, you're now able to pass forward. You're now able to tell your clients what to watch out for, what to be careful with, what mistakes not to make. Your brother paid the price, but other people are benefiting from it. So it was not, in some ways, completely for nothing, because in the totality of things in this world, some injustice that he suffered is helping someone else not suffer the same injustice.
Agreed. I have to keep that as the silver lining sometimes. And if it is true, that's what made me the advocate that I am. What terrifies me is like, it shouldn't come to that for other lawyers who aren't in my situation or your situation, right? These lawyers should want to be that person or want to help the clients. And so it shouldn't come down to some tragic event to make them want to fight for their clients. They should be doing that regardless.
So how do you think we get them to do that? How do you think an entire profession gets elevated where more people actually care and those who care can find resources to do their jobs better?
I don't really know. I would like to think that, something like this where we're talking about it, sharing it on a podcast or YouTube or social media, whatever the outlets are, that somebody hears this and they think, I can relate to this in some way. Whether they have, grown up in a situation like you did or a situation like I did, that every one of us comes into it with our own personal influence. And that I think if we share that or let people understand, like there was a point where I was ashamed that my brother was in prison, especially when I was in high school. I didn't get the high school life like other people. I wasn't going to parties on weekends. I got a job when I was 15 and I would work Monday through Friday. My mom would pick me up on Friday night and we would drive down. He started here in Salinas Valley and I would drive down in the middle of the night, sleep on the side of the highway and in my mom's van that she bought so that we could take the seats out and lay down and have a bed in the back and sleep on the side of the highway where the train tracks are to get up and go do a visit. And I did this every single weekend until I went to college. And then when I was up in Oregon, I would fly home, I would meet my mom, and we would do it once every 5 weeks. And so, for me, I didn't have this normal high school life. I had prison visits every weekend because I needed to make sure that my brother was okay.
But your clients today, Emily, benefit because you abhor that so much that there is nothing that you are not going to allow, there's nothing that you will allow to stand in your way in order to make sure that every possible option is exhausted before someone ends up being taken and goes to prison and suffers and has their family suffer the way you and your family have suffered.
Right. But I would hope that that's not what it takes for other attorneys to want to be the best that they can be. I would hope that it doesn't take some tragic learning experience and having somebody you care about go to prison, or even if it's a case, having a huge loss as an attorney, that shapes your career. But it shouldn't take that to make you better.
You know what I think? You know what I think it takes?
What?
I think it takes for people to see you, to see someone. No, okay, listen, I mean it. We need to, it's very hard to relate to people who are different from us.
Right.
When you learn about these things academically, or you learn about it through the courtroom, or through reading a file, or through watching TV, it's very, very different. But when a young lawyer sees this really amazing, shit-kicking, lawyer like you, when they watch this successful, beautiful, intelligent woman who is a force of nature in a courtroom, and then they hear your story, and they hear and they see the impact, I think they connect better with it. And so I think it's super important for those of us who are able to speak, who have experiences, or who know other people who have gone through these stories, to share them. And I think what's really difficult for so many of us is because we have no one to talk to oftentimes.
Right.
our professional lives are covered in secrecy. We're not allowed to talk about our specific cases. We struggle in silence. We don't talk. I don't know about you, but I was kind of relieved when my wife became the office manager at my firm, because it's like the vow of silence has finally lifted, because she became part of the legal team and I no longer have to hide, what's going on in my life. She can see it, it's in the shared, database. She can see what my schedule is like, what my visits are like, the work that I'm doing, the effect that it has on people. But I feel like we isolate ourselves from the outside world. If you do this job the way you're doing it, if you do it the way I try to do it, I think it can be a very lonely, stressful, oftentimes depressing and isolating experience.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you take not just one client, but all clients in their lowest, worst moments of their life, and you relate to that in some way, and you internalize it, and you think all of these things, right? That's where you start second guessing, like, oh, well, if he, had a better mom, or if he didn't have this drug problem, if this teacher would have protected him, all of this stuff. And you share this weird kind of guilt with them. But I think that's the biggest thing in our job, is like, we need to learn to turn all of that internal grief into a fight, like fight for them. Use this not as a weakness, but as a strength. Use this to make that person better. Use it to make yourself better. Even for me, like as a mom, there are things I think like, oh my gosh, I hope that my kids never do this, or I need to watch out for these types of things. We see the worst every single day. And so we have to figure out how to navigate it.
I couldn't agree with you more. I feel the same exact way. I know we all get affected differently. I think I shared with you this one thing that happened to me as a result of doing this job for a very, very long time, is that I constantly imagine worst case scenarios with everything, not just my cases, but in like everyday life. And my mind races to prepare emergency responses or solutions for them, so that I'm constantly thinking about problems that haven't occurred yet, just so that I can be ready. And so I'm always in this like crisis response mode. It's very good for my clients, because when emergency does happen, Mr. Pernick always has the right answer, it seems. But in a personal life, it can be really problematic, because you could have your spouse, your wife, your mom, they just came to visit you, they left the house, and they're driving off, and you get this thought, because you've handled, 5,000 DUI cases or whatever.
Right.
What if there is an accident? What if I never see them again? I think about that every time I have a fight with my wife. I have this thing, like I fight with my wife, I drive home to work, and then I think, what if something happens and I never get a chance, like so many of my clients, to have another conversation?
Right.
And that's usually when I call back and apologize, But the problem is that I am constantly in this crisis response mode. So even though it's a good thing for my clients, I'm affected by it.
Yes, right. I don't know how to process that, in terms of, I think we all have some level of response that we get from the reports that we see every day. My thing, and for better or worse, I don't know if I want to say this on a recording, but my thing is I look at any time that my kids complain about pain or something, or I think, did somebody touch my kid? I've read so many reports on those types of cases where I think, oh my God, if this happened, like, what am I going to do? And I know what I would do, which I'm not going to say on this recording.
Yeah. No, we're simpatico there. Yeah.
Right. But it's, your mind goes there. And it's something simple like, oh, my son, he just started, he was in kindergarten, and someone sent a letter home that said another child was looking under the bathroom stall, and that my son said, don't do this is inappropriate. And
smart boy, good job.
Right. But my mom brain was like, my lawyer mom brain was like, why was he looking under the stall? What did he do? Did he do anything else?
Yeah.
But I also don't want to like project that to my 5-year-old and give him all these questions, the third degree of like what exactly happened. But it does create this kind of anxiety inside of you.
Sleepovers, we've had those. Right.
I haven't do that yet.
My wife and I just had that argument recently where, we do a lot of cases involving, unfortunately, allegations of sexual assault, sometimes with very young victims, sometimes children. And I hate working on those cases in the house, because the setting is almost always the normal family setting. Somebody washing a kid, somebody, putting a child to bed, somebody, touching somebody under the kitchen table or whatever, And so I really hate blending personal and professional in that set of cases. I have no problem reading other types of police reports on my iPad, my kid running around in the background chasing my dog.
Exactly.
Sex cases bug me, but we had that discussion about sleepovers, and I was like, absolutely not. Over my dead body. Our son is not sleeping in anybody's house until, he's older, and we put those kind of protections in place.
Yeah. So we moved to a different community, and this new community that we're at, there's a lot of kids, and they do want to have sleepovers. And I'm like, nope. And my husband doesn't do anything in the legal profession. And so I don't know that he necessarily gets it. I think he thinks I'm a weirdo.
You are a weirdo.
I am a weirdo.
But in a really good way.
But it's like, I am super hypersensitive to that because you do see it in the reports. And it's always like the unsuspecting parents who you're like, oh, that would never happen to my kids. And so I took the stance of like, no sleepovers. I don't like having random babysitters. I see these things on Facebook where people will post and they're like, hey, is there anybody who can watch tonight on like the neighborhood group? And I'm like, who does that?
People on next door, apparently.
I know, but that is terrifying to me.
Because you've had cases where somebody used someone like that and then it happens. So you're extrapolating from that experience. And I think sometimes it's unfair to our families because we are observing, I'd like to think, a statistical abnormality. We're extrapolating from that and we're imagining that it's a much larger problem statistically than it probably is, we hope. That's the case.
I think that's the same as like your wife when she leaves the house getting hit by a DUI driver, right? The chances of that happening are probably very slim for your particular wife.
And yet I'm rehearsing how I'm going to respond, Emilys, how crazy it is. I'm rehearsing what happens when I get a phone call and what I'm going to say.
Right. Yeah.
I
just had this conversation with my husband at lunch on Friday, and we were talking about something where there had been a break-in in the office where my office is now, and I'm getting ready to start a trial. So on trial nights, I'm in my office until, sometimes 1 a.m. Well, these 3 guys came in at 11 o'clock at night, and it's like, what would I have done if they just showed up in my door?
You would have been like, hey, Johnny, I represented you on an armed robbery case 2 years ago. What are you doing here?
Exactly. Now, that gun is a violation of your probation. Yes, maybe. But it was like, and so my husband is like super caught up in it. Like, oh my God. I'm like, well, hopefully you don't have to get that phone call. But it's a big thing. Like, it does create this kind of anxiety or anxiousness in shit that's not even happened, nor do I ever think it's going to actually happen.
See, the difference between you and me is that I worry that it's going to happen. But,
I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't either.
I think the solution is for us to be aware that we're affected by the work that we do. I know one of the things I learned at this conference that we both attended is there was a lady who was presenting on the effects of professional stress on overexposure to trauma, which is what you and I both have, which is what many of our friends and colleagues have, and how over time, when you suffer from chronic exposure to it, if you don't take time to recharge, if you don't have anybody to talk to about this, if you don't take care of yourself, it builds up in your body, and your professional stress can lead to distress, and you find yourself in distress, and then you find it really affecting your life. And it's very hard for us as lawyers to advocate for ourselves, unfortunately, the same way we advocate for other people.
Right. And I think that part of being a good lawyer is you have to absorb that trauma of your clients. That's just more stress in your life, but you have to have some sort of way, like how you were saying, to cope with it or figure it out. Or there is the burnout and, all of the other ramifications of it, physical stress on your marriage, stress in your home life, all of that stuff. But, I think to better understand your clients, like the why did they do this? You have to learn that trauma. And I don't know a way to block it out, because I don't think you could. I don't think that you could be a good advocate if it didn't affect you. If your client tells you some very terrible things about their life or what has happened to them, I don't think that you can just shut that off. I think that you have to relate and feel. It's to what extent you feel or how you cope with it after.
I agree. And the problem is that when you do more and more and more work, and maybe that's why some lawyers are afraid to open that door. Maybe that's why some people are afraid to fully dive into it to the extent that I think the numbers show that we should. If you were to do that 50 to 75% of the time and get ears deep into this really heavy mental health work, it's heavy stuff.
Right.
Maybe that's a barrier to entry. Maybe that's another reason why people don't do it. It's so easy to avoid it. It's so easy to find some other way to cut a quick deal, to, work out some deal for a person to get out of custody, things like that. But I agree with you. We do have to understand our clients.
Right. It's a disservice if you don't. Your job should be to make them choose a different path. Yes, you have to try and get them the best deal or whatever it is, or if you can get the case dismissed, great. But you should also try and make them better or assist them with the resources that are available to where they don't need to come back.
Exactly. And that's the mission that I am on, because I really think that too many of us have tuned out and have become indifferent to just extraordinary amount of pain and suffering out there. And I don't think lawyers should be deaf or blind to it. I think we should use the fact that we have this additional training, that we have this additional education, that we have this judgment, hopefully, that has been inculcated in us, that hopefully through the experiences of hundreds or thousands of people we have helped in the past, we now know perhaps how to affect somebody else's condition, how to help them. And I think we should use it whenever we can, not just to pursue the immediate legal outcome so we can close the case, move on to the next one, but to truly change a person's life, and in doing so, change the world.
Right. And I think that we have the power to do it.
I agree.
We just have to get there.
We have to get there.
And put in the work to do it.
I agree. And also be mindful that if we want to be doing this in the long term, we have to begin thinking about things we didn't think about when we were younger, and start thinking about, how do I take care of myself so I can continue helping others for the next 20 years, for the next 30 years, for the rest of my life as an attorney, and start talking about this and start connecting with other lawyers and other professionals, mental health professionals, and start discussing how our work motivates us, how it is the purpose in our life, but also how it affects us. So we're not just having a drink after a long day every single day, but we're doing something different about it.
Right. And I hope that we can also shape these new attorneys coming in, like you said, and want to be better, and hope that they get better, and that they don't feel like kind of the odd man out, or think that, if you feel for that client that you're going to burn out. We all feel for that client, and make it more, I guess I should say, make it less of a stigma, for the jobs that we do. I think that's what the number one question you always get is, how could you represent these people? And it's,
how could you not?
Exactly.
Yeah. I always get asked that question. How could you represent someone who is guilty? And it's funny, because to me, representing someone who is guilty is actually quite easy.
Way easier.
It's when you have an innocent client that it truly changes how you feel, how you think. It affects your life. It affects the stress is incredible. But with a person who is guilty, I just know that I need to start looking at, why are they here? What happened? What can we do to make sure this doesn't happen again? What services do we align them with that we can incorporate into a proposed solution so we get a better legal outcome and help the person fix their life? In that sense, that's much easier. But I'm not sure a lot of people want to hear that at a cocktail party.
No, not at all.
Emily, it's been wonderful having you here. I'm so glad you and I ran into each other at the conference. I'm in awe of everything that you are and everything you've become. And your clients are incredibly fortunate to have you.
Thank you so much. And I wish the best for you as well in this new venture.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.